Emily sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by unopened boxes and half-drunk cups of tea. The fireplace crackled with low effort, its embers a lazy attempt to warm a room filled with shadows. Her fingers clutched a folded piece of paper, its edges worn from being opened and closed far too often. It was the last letter her husband had written her. It had been their anniversary. Now it was a lifeline. "My dearest Em, if you're reading this, it means life didn't go how we planned, and I'm so sorry. But please don't stop living. Promise me you'll chase the wind, find a new sky, and let yourself be happy again. Even if it takes years, I'll be with you in every wave, every breeze, every stroke of your paintbrush. Love always, Mark." The words should have comforted her. Instead, they wrapped around her like a vice, equal parts warmth and unbearable ache. How could she chase the wind when every breath she took felt like betrayal? Still, something about those words, "find a new sky," lingered. They haunted her in the quiet moments, like now, when the world outside felt like a mirror of the storm inside her. She looked around the house they had shared, the walls now stripped of laughter and warmth. Their life had ended in a heartbeat on a highway just outside Chicago. Mark was gone, and all that remained were traces, his cologne on the coat he left behind, their wedding photo on the mantel, and memories she couldn't bear to touch. The wind carried a mournful hush as Emily Bennett stepped out of her car and into the misty embrace of Cannon Beach, Oregon. The sharp scent of salt and pine mixed in the air, wrapping around her like a memory, familiar and foreign all at once. Waves crashed softly in the distance, muffled by the heavy marine fog rolling in from the Pacific. Her gaze swept the narrow street lined with small, weathered shops, the kind that seemed untouched by time. Life here moved slower, quieter. That's exactly what she needed. Her breath trembled as she stepped toward the front door of the small gray-shingled cottage she'd rented for the month. Refuge by the Sea was what the online listing called it. With a faded red door and a crooked fence, it looked more forgotten than cozy. But to Emily it was enough. It was away from the chaos, away from sympathy-soaked conversations, away from the echo of footsteps in her too-empty Chicago apartment. She fumbled with the keys, her fingers still stiff from hours of driving. When the door finally creaked open, she was greeted by the scent of wood and something faintly floral, like dried lavender and sea air. The interior was simple: wood floors, pale walls, a fireplace surrounded by chipped bricks, and mismatched furniture that had clearly seen better years. She dropped her duffel on the rug and stood in the center of the living room, listening to the silence. Silence used to be comforting. Now it made her skin crawl. Her husband Mark had loved noise, jazz pouring from the speakers, the hiss of something sizzling on the stove, his off-key humming as he tried to remember lyrics. Now there was nothing, just the crashing of distant waves and the sound of her own heartbeat. Emily took a slow breath and reached for her sketch pad from her bag, then stopped herself. She hadn't drawn in months, not since that night. Not since the world had cracked open and swallowed her whole. Instead, she collapsed onto the couch and stared out the large window overlooking the sea. Somewhere beneath the gray skies, life was still moving, but hers had stopped. The next morning arrived like a quiet apology. Pale gold light bled through the curtains, washing the room in a soft glow. Emily wandered into the small kitchen and made tea, the routine grounding her just enough to face the day. She pulled on a thick sweater and tied her curls into a low bun before heading into town for groceries. The streets of Cannon Beach were lined with boutiques, bakeries, and art galleries with hand-painted signs swinging gently in the breeze. The sea was never out of sight, always humming in the background like a lullaby. Locals moved about with familiarity, shopkeepers chatting on stoops, old couples walking their dogs, a group of children chasing bubbles near the taffy shop. Emily felt like a shadow slipping between them. She entered a small general store with fogged-up windows and the scent of cedar. As she gathered a few essentials, milk, bread, fruit, tea, a low male voice broke the quiet. "You might want to skip the strawberries. They came in bruised this week." Emily looked up, startled, and found herself staring into a pair of kind hazel eyes. The man stood beside the fruit display, holding a toolbox in one hand and a can of iced coffee in the other. He wore a faded blue hoodie with a tear near the shoulder and jeans dusted with sawdust. Sorry, he added quickly, smiling. Didn't mean to startle you. I'm just doing a few repairs for Sandra in the back. Emily blinked, unsure how to respond. She hadn't spoken to anyone since arriving. He gestured to the berries. You can grab the apples instead. Local farm. They actually taste like something. She glanced at the bruised strawberries, then reached for the apples. Thanks, she murmured, her voice rough from disuse. No problem. He paused for a moment, then added, New in town? She nodded. I'm Jack. He offered a small, easy smile. I do odd jobs around here. Fix things. Paint stuff. Sometimes build birdhouses when no one's looking. A flicker of amusement tugged at her lips, surprising her. I'm Emily, she said softly. Nice to meet you. Emily, welcome to Cannon Beach. Their eyes held for a moment. Just a flicker of recognition between two people, carrying invisible weight. Then the moment passed. That afternoon, Emily unpacked slowly, placing her late husband's favorite mug beside her own in the cupboard, though she knew she wouldn't use it. She didn't cry, not yet. Her tears had long dried into something heavier, something wordless. The sky darkened early, as coastal skies often do, and she found herself on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea. The waves were louder here, crashing against the cliffs with a rhythm that reminded her of a heartbeat, steady, relentless, alive. She closed her eyes, letting the sound fill the empty spaces inside her. Mark had always dreamed of retiring by the ocean. Somewhere with a crooked porch and wind chimes, he'd said, You'll paint and I'll burn pancakes every Sunday. She wrapped the blanket tighter around herself and whispered into the wind, I made it, love. You didn't. And for the first time in weeks the tears came, not in wild sobs but quiet, aching streams that carved lines down her cheeks and dripped silently onto the porch. She didn't wipe them away. She let them fall. Let them be. The next few days passed in a slow rhythm. Emily took long walks along the shore, her boots crunching on wet sand. She found solace in the way the sea never asked anything of her. It simply existed, vast, deep, and unbothered by her grief. On the third day, her sink clogged. She tried to fix it, then gave up and asked the shop owner if she knew someone. Sandra from the general store gave her a card. When Jack arrived that afternoon, toolbox in hand, Emily felt an unfamiliar flutter in her chest. Not attraction, not yet. Just relief, familiarity. You again, he said with a grin. Told you this town was full service. She smiled faintly and stepped aside to let him in. As he worked beneath the sink, humming to himself, she found herself sketching him without realizing. His strong hands, the angle of his jaw, the way his brows furrowed in focus. Her pencil moved as if it had been waiting. You draw? Jack asked, noticing her sketchpad. She froze, then slowly nodded. Haven't in a while, she said. Well, he said, tightening a pipe. Seems like you still got it. Emily didn't reply, but something warmed inside her. That night she lit a fire and sat by it, sketchpad in hand. The sketch of Jack was rough, but there was life in it, movement, presence. She didn't know what this was, this fragile thread of connection. But for the first time since Mark died, she didn't feel entirely alone, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin. Rain tapped gently against the windows of the cottage the next morning, the kind of soft, rhythmic drizzle that lulled the coastal town into a sleepy hush. Emily stood barefoot in the kitchen, stirring her tea, absently as she watched the sea blur into the horizon through the mist. The sketchpad sat open on the table behind her, Jack's unfinished portrait, still caught in mid-expression. There was something steady about him, like the tide, predictable, grounding. He didn't ask questions, didn't probe. He offered presence, and after months of feeling invisible, that alone felt extraordinary. A knock at the door startled her. She wrapped her sweater tighter and padded across the room. When she opened it, Jack stood there with a crooked smile and a soaked flannel shirt. Hope I'm not interrupting, he said, brushing wet hair from his forehead. Sandra told me your porch light's been flickering. Thought I'd stop by and take a look. Emily blinked. She hadn't even noticed. Sure, come in. He stepped inside, bringing with him the scent of rain and sawdust. Murphy, the cottage's unofficial tabby cat, slinked out from beneath the couch to investigate. Persistent little guy, Jack said, crouching down to scratch the cat's chin. He's been your shadow since you moved in. He came with the cottage, Emily replied, managing a smile. I think he adopted me. Jack stood and gave her a look that was more knowing than curious. "You look more alive today." She looked away, flushing slightly. "I cried for the first time since I got here." "Maybe that's progress." His smile softened. "Crying's not weakness. It's the body's way of making space for light." Emily studied him for a moment, surprised by the gentleness in his voice. "You sound like someone who knows what it means to carry darkness." He met her gaze. "Maybe. But I've learned you don't have to live in it forever." They fell into a quiet rhythm over the next few days. Jack would stop by to fix things that didn't quite need fixing: the creaky stair, the squeaky window, the rusted hinge on the gate. Emily never asked him to come, but she never turned him away either. One afternoon, she returned from a beach walk to find him on the back porch, building a small wooden bench beneath the salt-scarred window. "You don't have to do that," she said, setting her coat aside. Jack glanced up from his work. "I know, but I wanted to." Emily tilted her head. "Why?" he shrugged. "Because you sit out here every evening. Figured you deserved a proper seat." She didn't respond, but something shifted in her chest. A quiet ache, a warmth. She stepped inside, made 2 mugs of tea, and returned to sit beside him as he sanded the edges of the bench. "I used to be an art therapist," she said after a long pause. Jack glanced at her, surprised. "Yeah, back in Chicago. I worked with trauma patients. Children, mostly. That's beautiful." It was. Until I lost the part of me that believed I could still help. Jack set down the sander and looked at her more closely. "That wasn't your fault." Emily's throat tightened. "My husband died 5 months ago. Car accident. I was supposed to meet him for dinner that night, but I stayed late with a patient. He texted me from the restaurant. 'No worries. I'll get us a bottle of wine and see you soon.' I never saw him again." Silence fell between them, heavy and raw. Jack leaned back slowly, his hands stained with dust and memory. "I'm sorry, Emily." She nodded, unable to speak. Her fingers curled around her mug, absorbing its heat like it could hold her together. "I know what it's like," Jack said quietly, "to feel like you could have done something different. Like maybe if you'd turned left instead of right, everything would still be okay." Emily looked up. "What happened to you?" Jack hesitated. The wind whispered through the trees before he spoke again. "I was engaged once. In Portland. We had a business, plans, the whole picture. Then one day I found out she'd been cheating on me, with my best friend." Emily's eyes widened. "Broke something in me," he continued. "Not just trust. My sense of who I was. So I drank, pushed everyone away. Woke up one morning and realized I didn't want to be that man anymore. So you came here, yeah, built birdhouses, fixed fences, stayed quiet. Let the waves beat the noise out of my head." They sat in silence for a while, both watching the horizon like it held the answers they were too afraid to voice. "I used to paint grief into color," Emily whispered. "Now all I see is gray." "Gray is a color too," Jack said gently. "It's where light starts." The next evening, Jack brought over a bottle of red wine. "For your porch," he said. "Figured we could toast your new bench." They sat side by side beneath a blanket, Murphy curled between them, and watched the sun sink below the waves. The sky bled with streaks of rose and gold, as if the world itself was healing in layers. "To broken things," Jack said, raising his glass. Emily raised hers. "And the people who fix them." They clinked glasses and she sipped slowly, letting the warmth slide down her throat. "Did you ever finish that drawing?" he asked. Her cheeks flushed. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see it." "I think I would." She disappeared inside and returned with the sketch pad. Handing it over, she held her breath. Jack studied the image, his face, his hands, the gentle curve of his smile captured in pencil. "You made me look better than I do," he said softly. Emily laughed, a real warm laugh that surprised them both. "No," she replied. "I just drew what I saw." Their eyes met and something passed between them. Not desire, not yet, but something tender, real, a spark in the ashes. The next morning, Emily found a small package at her doorstep. Inside was a blank canvas, a set of oil pastels, and a note in Jack's handwriting, "In case you want to paint again." No pressure, just light. She held the gift to her chest, tears stinging her eyes, not from sadness, but from something gentler. Gratitude. Hope. She took the canvas to the porch, the sky still painted in soft morning hues, and opened the pastels one by one. Her fingers trembled as she pressed color to canvas. Pale gold, sea green, misty blue. The lines came slowly, but they came. The world inside her wasn't silent anymore. And as the waves whispered below and Murphy purred at her feet, Emily knew this place wasn't just a refuge from the past. It was the beginning of something new. The sun had broken through the clouds after 3 days of rain, casting golden light across Cannon Beach and painting the wet rooftops with warmth. Emily stood in the kitchen, barefoot, her fingers smudged with pastel as she stirred honey into her tea. The canvas on the easel near the window was coming alive, layers of ocean, grief and healing unfolding across its surface. She hadn't expected to paint again. And yet here she was, fingers stained, heart uncertain but open. It felt terrifying and freeing. Jack hadn't stopped by in 2 days. She told herself it was fine, that their growing closeness didn't mean anything beyond a fragile friendship. But she missed his voice, his way of just being there. The bench he built had become her evening haven, her place to breathe again. As if summoned by thought, a knock sounded at the door. She opened it to find Jack holding 2 paper cups of coffee and a sheepish smile. His hoodie was damp at the collar from morning dew. "Sorry I've been scarce," he said. There was a busted greenhouse roof out in Manzanita. "Took longer than I thought." Emily took one of the cups, grateful for the warmth. "You didn't need to explain." Jack shrugged. "Felt like I should." She nodded, then gestured inside. "Come on in." He stepped inside and noticed the painting immediately. His eyes widened slightly. "Is that new?" "Started it 2 nights ago." Jack moved closer, his gaze trailing the curves of ocean and light. "It's incredible, Emily," she flushed. "It's messy. It's alive," he said quietly. They stood side by side, sipping coffee, letting silence speak for them. Jack broke it first. "You've got talent that tells stories without needing words." Emily turned to him, eyes searching. "You do that too." Jack raised an eyebrow. "How? By showing up? By fixing broken things? By being quiet but never absent?" He looked down, his jaw tightening for the briefest second. "I'm not always someone people can count on," he said. Emily frowned. "That's not what I've seen." Jack opened his mouth as if to say something else, but stopped. Instead, he offered a small smile and stepped back. "I should let you paint." "Just wanted to bring you coffee." "I'll come by tomorrow." "I promised Sandra I'd help set up her garden shed." He left with a nod, and Emily watched him go, unsettled by something beneath the surface of his voice. There was something he wasn't saying, something weighing on him. Later that afternoon, Emily wandered into town for supplies. The sun was warm on her shoulders, the streets more alive than usual, families visiting the beach, tourists snapping photos of Haystack Rock. As she stood in line at the local bakery, a woman ahead of her turned slightly and did a double take. "Oh," the woman said, squinting. "You must be new in town." Emily offered a polite nod. "Just staying for a bit." The woman smiled, tucking a strand of sleek blonde hair behind her ear. She was in her late 30s, well-dressed, the kind of person who looked like they belonged in a wine bar more than a beach town. "I'm Julia. I used to live here. Came down from Portland for the weekend, visiting friends." Emily smiled faintly. "I'm Emily." Julia's eyes flickered. "You're staying at the Greycott Cottage, right?" Emily was surprised. "Yes?" "Jack Sullivan's been spending a lot of time there lately, hasn't he?" The way she said it made Emily pause. "We're friends," Emily said slowly. Julia gave a dry chuckle. "That's Jack's thing. He's good at being whoever you need him to be, until he vanishes." Emily felt her spine straighten. "Excuse me?" Julia shrugged. "We dated years ago, before he crashed everything in Portland. Left his fiancée at the altar, burned bridges with half the city. Took off without a word." Emily's chest tightened. "I don't know that part of his life. No one here does. He reinvented himself. But Jack's always been a runner." With that, Julia collected her pastries and offered a too-sweet smile. "Be careful, Emily. Grief makes you see things that aren't really there." Emily walked home slowly, her thoughts swirling louder than the waves. Left his fiancée at the altar. Took off without a word. Burned bridges. It couldn't be true, or maybe it could. Jack had said he was broken, that he drank, that he'd left his past behind. But why hadn't he told her everything? The man who brought her flowers wrapped in brown paper, who built her a bench, who stood quietly beside her grief. Could he also be the man who walked away from everything? Back at the cottage, she stared at the painting. The colors felt different now, unsteady. She picked up a brush, then put it down again. Her hands shook. Jack arrived just after dusk. "I saw Julia today," Emily said without preamble. Jack stilled. "She told me what happened in Portland." He didn't speak, his jaw set. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice small. Jack leaned against the doorframe, eyes clouded. "Yeah, it's true." Emily waited. "I was engaged. Her name was Lily. We were together for 5 years. Built a business together. I thought we were solid. Turns out, she and my best friend had been together behind my back for almost a year." Emily winced. "I found out 3 days before the wedding. Cancelled everything. Told no one, just disappeared. I wasn't proud of how I handled it." "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "I didn't want to bring that chaos into your healing. You'd already lost so much. I didn't want to be one more person who failed you. I never asked you to be perfect, Jack." "No," he said softly, "but you looked at me like I was safe. And I didn't want to lose that." Emily's throat burned. "You should have trusted me." "I was scared." "So am I," she snapped, voice cracking. "You think I'm not terrified every second I start to feel something again? That maybe I'll lose it like I lost him?" Jack stepped forward. "I don't want to replace him." "Emily, I know you can't, but you are someone I was beginning to trust." Silence fell. Jack took a long breath. "If you want me to leave, I will." She didn't answer. He turned, his voice low. "I'm not that man anymore, Emily, but I understand if you don't believe me." The door clicked shut behind him, and for the first time in weeks the cottage felt cold again. That night the storm returned. Not outside, but within. Emily sat on the floor, surrounded by crumpled sketches and torn paper. Her heart felt like it had been scraped raw. Jack's past, her fears, the echo of loss, it all collided like waves on rocks. She wasn't sure what scared her more, that Jack had secrets, or that she still wanted him despite them. At some point near dawn she lit a candle, placed her sketch pad on her lap, and began to draw, not Jack, not Mark, but herself, her eyes wide and uncertain, her hands gripping a brush, her body small beneath crashing waves. She didn't try to make it pretty. She made it honest. And in that moment, surrounded by the mess of her healing, she found something unexpected, a quiet strength. The storm passed by morning. The sky over Cannon Beach was washed clean, pale gold stretching across the cliffs like a soft apology. The ocean had calmed. Its fury subsided into gentle waves that whispered secrets to the shore. Inside the cottage, Emily woke curled up on the rug beside the cold hearth. Murphy was sprawled next to her, purring faintly in sleep. She sat up slowly, her muscles aching, her heart tender from a night of restlessness and tears. The sketchpad lay beside her. She picked it up and stared at the self-portrait she'd drawn during the storm. The first time she'd dared to face herself on paper. It was rough, unfinished. But it was her, stronger than she'd allowed herself to believe. Emily stood and walked to the open window. The scent of wet pine and salt filled the room. In the distance, the morning light touched the tips of the waves. She hadn't seen Jack since their confrontation. The silence between them had stretched across 2 days, longer than she'd wanted it to. She'd replayed their argument again and again. Not just what he said, but what she hadn't. She had been so afraid of being hurt again that she forgot something vital. Jack hadn't left. He had shown up again and again, gentle, consistent, present. He'd given her space. He'd brought her back to life in quiet ways. And when it was time to tell the truth, he had. She looked down at the portrait and whispered, "You have to stop running, too." By late morning, Emily found herself walking into town. The streets were still damp, puddles reflecting the sky, and the breeze had that crisp, post-storm sweetness that made everything feel like it could start over. She passed the bakery, the gallery, the bookstore, then stopped in front of the old wooden fence leading to Jack's workshop. The door was open. She hesitated, then stepped inside. Jack was sanding a piece of driftwood, his movements methodical, lost in the rhythm. His sleeves were rolled up, sawdust clinging to his arms, a pencil tucked behind his ear. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment, they just stared at each other, quiet and cautious. "Hey," he said, voice rough with surprise. "Hi." He set the sander down gently, brushing dust from his hands. "Didn't expect to see you." "I know," she said, stepping closer. "I didn't expect to come." Jack searched her face. "You okay?" She nodded. "I've been thinking." "So have I." Emily drew in a breath, nerves coiling in her stomach. "I realized I've spent the last few months terrified of feeling anything. And just when I started to feel again, I panicked." Jack gave a small, sad smile. "You had every right to." "No," she whispered. "I had every right to be careful, but not to shut you out. You were honest with me. I just didn't know how to hold that without seeing it through the lens of my own pain." He stepped forward slowly. "Emily, I don't need you to be perfect, Jack," she said. "I just need you to be real. And you have been, since the day we met." He exhaled shakily. "You're not the only one who panicked. When I realized I cared about you, it scared the hell out of me." She gave him a soft look. "Then maybe we're both just two scared people, trying not to mess up something that feels good." Jack reached for her hand. "I never wanted to be your escape." "You weren't," she said. "You were my reminder that life doesn't stop just because love breaks." His fingers closed gently around hers. "And maybe it doesn't break. It just bends, changes shape." They stood there in the dusty light of the workshop, the scent of cedar and salt between them. For the first time, neither of them was holding back. Emily stepped closer. "I want to see what we could be if we stopped hiding from the past." Jack smiled, eyes shining. "Then let's build something. Slow, honest." She nodded. "Together." He pulled her into a quiet, steady embrace, his hand pressing gently to the back of her head, her arms wrapped around him. And for a long, still moment, they held each other, not to fill the emptiness, but to honor the way they'd both survived it. That evening, Cannon Beach glowed under the Lantern Festival that marked the end of summer. The town square was filled with soft music, laughter, and paper lanterns rising gently into the darkening sky like floating wishes. Children chased each other through the sand with glow sticks. Couples held hands, and the scent of bonfire smoke lingered in the air. Emily and Jack walked side by side, fingers interlaced. She wore a soft cream sweater, and long jeans rolled at the ankles. Jack had traded his usual hoodie for a simple button-up. They looked like they belonged, not to the past, not to pain, but to this gentle moment of now. At the edge of the dunes, lanterns were being passed out. Jack handed one to Emily along with a match. "They say you're supposed to write a wish before you let it go." Emily pulled a pen from her bag and paused. "What are you writing?" Jack asked. She looked at him with a tender smile. "Not a wish, a promise." He raised a brow. "To keep walking forward, even when the path is messy. Even when it hurts." She handed him the pen. "Your turn." Jack stared at the lantern for a long moment. Then he wrote slowly, carefully, "To show up, always." They lit the lantern together and released it, watching as it rose into the sky, joining the others like stars reclaiming the night. Emily leaned her head on Jack's shoulder, her heart full in a way she hadn't thought possible again. "I still miss him," she said softly. "I know," Jack whispered. "You always will, and I still have hard days. I'll be there for them." She looked up at him. "I don't need saving." "I know," he said with a smile. "You just needed someone to stand beside you." And he did. As their lantern disappeared into the sea of golden light, Emily realized something beautiful. This wasn't about replacing what was lost. It was about making space for what could be found. A week later, she placed the final brushstroke on her painting, the first completed piece since Mark died. It was a woman standing at the edge of the ocean, the wind in her hair, light breaking over the horizon. Her expression was soft, open, brave. Emily signed her name at the bottom and smiled. Jack walked in just then, holding 2 cups of tea. He paused to look at the painting. "She looks like you. She is me." He stepped behind her and wrapped his arms gently around her waist. "You've come back to life." Emily turned in his arms. "No, I've started over. One breath at a time." Jack kissed her forehead, then her cheek. "So, what do you want to do today?" She smiled. "The beach, the porch, maybe paint. Just be." He nodded. "I like the sound of that." They walked hand in hand out onto the porch. The bench Jack had built still standing strong beneath the window. Murphy followed lazily behind, tail swaying like a pendulum. The wind whispered through the trees, the sea sang below, and the sky stretched wide and forgiving. They didn't need perfection. They had each other. And in that quiet space of love, grief, and hope, they found their refuge, together. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me on this emotional journey through the heart's refuge. Your time, your presence, and your love for storytelling mean more than words can express. Every like, comment, and share helps bring these heartfelt stories to life, and it's your support that keeps this channel going. Whether you've been here since the beginning, or just found this corner of the internet, know this, you are deeply appreciated. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's keep building this beautiful community, one story, one emotion, one moment at a time. With gratitude and love, Vintage Mike Tales.